How y'all doing? It's No Bandit back at you today. Today we're going to discuss being institutionalized. What does being institutionalized mean in prison, right? You know, it's a lot of mental torture, a lot of mental stress, and a lot of mental things you go through when you're in prison. Locked in a cage, locked in a little cell. You know, some people go crazy, some people can't handle it. Isolation. If you're in the lockup in the hole and all that too, long periods of time, going in and out of prison, in and out of prison. you know you get institutionalized. I was in there 15 years, so even 5, 10, 15 years, people get institutionalized. One of my homeboys stayed in there 25 years. He only had a nickel to start out with, but that's his home. After so long, that's your home. They don't even care about going home to the streets. They just, that's your home, and that's what you accept after so long. I started getting that way too, but I always fought for my freedom. I always thought my mind one day I'll be free, and keep the mind strong, keep on going, right? I didn't want to be, institutionalized, but ended up I was after a while. After I got out and stuff, I realized a lot of things about myself, right? But when I was in there my 15 years, I seen two, three, four, five guys come back. My boys, get out, come back, get out, come back. You know what I mean? Because I was in there so long. Like, there's nothing out there. One of my homeboys told me, he's like, "You're not missing nothing out there, man. There's nothing out there." That's institutionalized. When you think there's nothing in the free world, prison's where it's at. You know what I mean? Prison is not where it's at. You know what I'm saying? But they've been in and out so long, their whole life. That's all they know. People inside, stay in their cells 5, 6, 7 years at a time. They don't come out of their cell. They peek out of the cell and they're pure white because they haven't been outside to the sun, to the yard. You get a certain pale white from being in prison. After 2, 3, 4 years, right? Especially if you stay in your cell all the time and you don't come out. Plus, if you're 23 lockdown, you're in the cell by yourself all the time. You know what I mean? After a while, people start talking to themselves. There's nobody to talk to. You're going crazy. Your mind's going crazy. You got to be strong-minded. It breaks a lot of people. It's bad to throw someone in solitary confinement too for 4 years at a time. Shit like that. Even 30, 60, 90 days, 180 days. Mentally fucks with you for the rest of your life. Being in prison and all that, being in a cell, living. You get used to living in a closet. You know what I'm saying? Institutionalized. You want to go back. People don't care to go back. That's why they get out and commit crime and all that shit all the time, because they're not scared to go there. They've already been there. Their family's there, so they don't give a shit out here. They're gonna go commit crime and do whatever and have fun, have a good time until they come back. My boy was like that. He'd go out and party just to come back to prison and tell us all the stories he did when he was out. You know what I'm saying? It got like a pattern. He'd come back, tell us more stories for 2 years, get out, come back. He's got more new stories, funny ass stories and shit. Why all of us are doing hard time trying to get that one chance just to get out. We can't get a fucking chance to get out, right? Because I'm doing hard time 85% all the way. Violent crimes and shit, right? But these other guys are getting out, coming back, getting in, coming back. It's like revolving doors. Like, damn, give somebody a chance that wants to get out, that wants to do something with their life and shit. But you do the crime and you do the time. I did my crime, so I'm doing my time, man. But yeah, it's hard on you mentally. And even when you get out, institutionalized, is a you can be institutionalized while you're in there, and then even when you get out of prison, you can be institutionalized in your mind. Doing all that time doesn't go away in your mind. But it's a part of your life. 15, 20 years is a long time of your life. Being somewhere else, like, so that's going to be in your mind forever. You're never going to forget that. You're going to have flashbacks. You're going to have certain feelings and emotions all the time, and it's just like going to another country, living there for 10, 15 years, coming back. You're always going to remember that country. You're always going to have memories of bad shit, good shit, whatever from that country where you went to. Same as prison. Been in prison that long in your life. But the institutionalized motherfuckers just keep coming back, coming back, coming back. It gets sick, it gets old. But that's where they live. That's their home. They're okay with that. You know what I mean? I'm not okay with that. I did all my time one shot, 15 years straight. I hope I'm not go back. I've been doing good and shit. So, you know, but institutionalized is really a really bad thing. it takes your mind, your life, and everything from you, right? And it's a real bad situation. You know, some dudes I knew that didn't. They could go home, but they wouldn't go home. They said, "Well, you can go do this class or these classes and shit, and you can go home." You know, but they wouldn't go do the classes or go do the groups or go do the drug treatments or go do none of that shit. So they'd rather sit there and not go home. So just instead of doing 10, you know, you want to do 15, 20 because you don't want to go to the group and the classes. You know what I mean? You know, that's institutionalized because you're already sitting there. You know, you're already comfortable. You got your cell, you got your little job, you got your little routine, you know. After so long, it just gets comfortable. You know what I mean? People like that shit. But that's truth about being institutionalized, man. I mean, it can get you or it always stays with you, you know. Just because you don't go back and back all the time like other people, you know, your mind is still institutionalized from being in there for so long, too. That's why some dudes get out here, they can't focus in the real world. You know, they can't adapt. They can't, you know, prevail. They can't work towards their dreams. They can't, you know, associate with out here because they've been inside so long. You know, being told what to do. So having freedom, you can't. You need someone to overlook you and tell you what to do. You know, some people are like that. You know, so you got to navigate yourself when you get out of there. You know, because from being stuck in there, your dignity, you feel like a an animal from being in there and shit. You know, you got certain feelings and emotions and shit when you get out of there, right? You know, then you doubt yourself, and you know, so it's a hard thing to do, a hard step to do, you know, getting out and staying out, you know. But that's just some stories about institutionalized. Some of my boys I knew in prison, you know, kept coming back, you know. But that's just their life. That's where they live. That's what they want to do. That's their family, you know. But that's how it is. All right, guys. Peace out, man.